Hey there folks, welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today we're going to be talking about the newest album from Neon Jungle, the debut album titled Welcome to the Jungle. You know, it's been a while since I've talked about pop girl groups, so let's revisit that topic again. Now look, as I said in the past, most girl groups, they don't usually tend to be my thing. Now I'm not saying I don't have a certain amount of respect and appreciation for the roles that acts like TLC or yeah, even the Spice Girls played in the creation of modern pop, but they aren't usually my thing, just not to my personal taste. Hell, the reason I like Girls Aloud as much as I do is more for pretty solid songwriting and some seriously great production courtesy of Xenomania, more than the actual performances or the performers themselves. But one thing that I have noticed over the past 15 or so years is that girl groups don't so much define the pop landscape as they just adapt to what is currently popular in the mainstream, especially if we're looking at groups originating in the UK. The Spice Girls, for instance, they rode the high-energy plastic dance pop trend throughout the 90s. Destiny's Child coasted on the path that TLC already created and throughout the R&B boom in the early 2000s. And the Pussycat Dolls were the concoction of a marketing team that focused on image and sex above everything else, looked at the sleazier music of the mid to late 2000s, and thought, hey, how about we can make that, but make it that much worse? Ugh. But you know what? It looks like similar trends are continuing with our current crop of British girl groups. Little Mix moved more towards R&B with their album Salute, and while they haven't really gotten the chart success that they really do deserve in the United States, it's only a matter of time before the current neo-soul shift in the mainstream snags some of their material for the charts. Fifth Harmony, on the other hand, seems to be going for the percussion-heavy, hip-hop inspired pop music with their most recent single, Boss, a song that I will deal with whenever they drop that next album, because there's definitely a fair amount to talk about with that particular song. Now the third group is Neon Jungle, the newest and arguably the girl group with the least amount of buzz on this side of the Atlantic, one that I discovered completely by accident when buying that self-titled Jungle record that I covered last week and already have mostly forgotten about. And unlike their competition, Neon Jungle seemed to be going more along the lines of the Spice Girls by appropriating modern EDM trends for their debut album, Welcome to the Jungle. So out of sheer curiosity, I bought the album and gave it a couple of listens. How was it? It's okay, I guess. I wouldn't quite say it's stellar or an essential listen, but as a pop record, I've definitely heard worse. At the same time, though, I've heard better, and there aren't that many things that make Welcome to the Jungle by Neon Jungle really stand out for me, both good and bad, and I'm not sure the things that really do stand out do enough to elevate this record into really good territory. So, okay, to explain this, let's start with the girls themselves, all of whom have distinctive voices and a unique sound, and who are mostly passable singers with the help of the occasional bit of pitch correction. Now for me, the most interesting singers of the group are Asami with her richer, almost folk-inspired lower range, and Amira's more sultry delivery, but all four of them, they're solid enough, they've got their own personalities, and thus it completely baffles me why they don't harmonize together more or opt for more complicated vocal arrangements. Hell, there are only a few songs where they sing as a unifying group, and mostly on the choruses at that, where they seem more concerned on these tracks with oddly placed bragging rap breakdowns, which I wouldn't say are badly written or delivered poorly, but they aren't exactly memorable beyond your typical luxury rap. And honestly, that's the same comment I would make about all the singers here. They aren't bad singers, but I'm not seeing a lot from them that they're bringing the four of them together in one band that I couldn't hear from any other one pop starlet on the radio, just saying. Now granted, the instrumentation and production don't exactly help here. Most of the production is handled by Europop producers who I've never heard of, who don't exactly bring a hugely unique sound to the table beyond some admittedly solid technical skills in creating an expansive, slightly percussion-heavy mix. And in Neon Jungle's credit, they can hold their own on pop songs like this, and there are very few moments where overproduction gets in the way. Looking at you, Fifth Harmony, where this happens all the time. Now that's not saying there aren't some moments on this album that are quite solid. I like the heavier, sharper synth line on Braveheart, the Lady Gaga-esque synths and vocal lines on the verses of the title track, the propulsive, punchy energy of Trouble, the ghostly pianos on Waiting Game, and the real dramatic string sections on Fool Me, which pretty much redeems that song. What became decidedly odd about the instrumentation on this record is that the production between reverb-saturated down-key ballads like Louder, Sleepless in London, and Waiting Game, and the rest of the upbeat dance pop of this album, because if you dig into the electronic elements, many of the synth and percussion tones are very similar and surprisingly cohesive, with the exception of the oddly layered Sleepless in London, which is pretty rare to see across the board blend blending these tones and making them surprisingly cohesive across the board. It's really the production that saves this album. Now granted, I can't exactly say that the melodic progressions really grip me beyond your typical electro pop. The usual problem that you run into with percussion heavy pop music in this vein, it's happening all the time. Or that there weren't some synth tones that just annoyed the hell out of me, like on So Alive, just really poor sound there. But I'm not gonna deny that the instrumentation works if you're just looking to dance. It's got some good grooves here, I can't deny that. But where this record struggles most would probably come down to the lyrics. That they're not exactly bad, but more overwritten and honestly not all that interesting. Now, don't get me wrong, there are moments of nuance that make a couple of the songs a little bit worthwhile in a shallow pop vein, like the reckless, nightlife-inspired Trouble. Hell, Louder works as a pretty solid, if completely hyperbolic, Party the Pain Away song in the vein of something like Sia would make. And Waiting Game, it goes for the complicated dynamic where there's physical satisfaction in the relationship, but little else when it comes to that emotional connection. That's not often a relationship that's really exposed on most songs. I kind of like that. But for the most part, the songs are your typical love on the dance floor jams that use their references just a little bit too clumsily to be ignored. Maybe it's just me, but discovering that the opening track Braveheart had nothing to do with the Mel Gibson movie was for me more than a little bit exasperating. And Welcome to the Jungle steals the title from a classic Guns N' Roses song, and outside of some occasionally interesting tropical imagery that Pharoah Monch did better on his song The Jungle earlier this year, it doesn't exactly do a lot with said imagery. Hell, Badman tries to play with the empowerment anthem and then anchors it by saying that they walk like a bad man. Now, okay, I obviously get the assertion of arrogance and power, but it's really an odd turn to be stating it so plainly outright. I mean, do most girls want to walk like bad men? That just comes across as odd here. Fool me if anything gets worse by asserting that they don't want to learn their lessons so they keep making the same mistakes, which would be fine if the framing of the song wasn't plainly trying to glorify or romanticize a crazy relationship or show it as just this reckless fun adventure when in most cases they really aren't. And then there's the song Can't Stop the Love. And look, I get the sentiment behind the song and trying to craft a love will fix everything anthem in the vein of, let's say, Where is the Love by the Black Eyed Peas. And honestly, it's got the exact same problems that that song has because it's so shallow and paper thin and broad that it becomes so hard to take seriously for me, especially considering the content on the rest of the album. And yeah, Snob Skrilla isn't bad on his rap verse about racial profiling, but it feels like it's from an entirely different song, probably fit better on a different song, and just cannot help but feel incredibly out of place on this record, especially when comparison with the rap breakdowns that the girls present on some of their tracks. Because, okay, ultimately look, there's a limit to how much I can really criticize about an album that's plainly more intended for dancing at clubs or house parties, where lyrics don't matter nearly as much even by the standards of pop music. And ultimately, on that dance pop, you have to judge it on those standards. And you know what? If there's enough solid crescendos and beats to make this album at least passable and actually fairly well produced, I like the production here. But outside of some interesting vocals and the occasional lyric that does show a little bit more nuance, I don't get a lot out of this record at all, and it really does not stand out even by the standards of modern dance pop. And without many standout vocal performances or harmonies or interesting melodic progressions or even gripping lyrics, this album just doesn't do a lot for me at all. In the end, I do think this album is passable, and it does have no real duds. So I'm giving it a very cautious 6 out of 10 and a tentative recommendation. But look, in a pop climate where we have multiple girl groups coming out of the UK right now, I'm not quite sure Neon Jungle brings enough new to the table to really stand out. Maybe that sophomore album might fix that, so let's just hope so. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. If there's anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, or any other albums coming out or who have already come out that you want me to take a look at, I'd be more than happy to give them a listen. Until then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.